Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
Year 1879 marks a pivotal moment in the history of psychology. The year Wilhelm Wundt established his laboratory at the University of Leipzig, conventionally regarded as the first dedicated solely to psychological inquiry. Wundt's Principles of Physiological Psychology, published in 2 volumes across 1873 and 1874, later revised significantly through multiple editions, represents a foundational text for this newly emergent discipline. This essay undertakes a comprehensive, section-by-section critical evaluation of the claims, methodological approaches, and conceptual frameworks presented within Principles of Physiological Psychology, examining its enduring legacy and impact on the development of experimental psychology, taking into account only the 1879 version. Section 1 Introduction to Physiological Psychology and its Scope. Wundt begins by delineating the scope of his physiological psychology, distinguishing it from purely philosophical or physiological inquiries. He proposes an interdisciplinary approach, merging the methods of experimental physiology with the introspective techniques of philosophy, to investigate the immediate content of conscious experience. This approach departs from traditional philosophical introspection by emphasizing rigorous experimental control and quantitative measurement, aiming to establish psychology as a scientific discipline grounded in empirical observation. A core claim presented is the feasibility of applying experimental methods to the study of consciousness, overcoming the perceived limitations of introspection as a subjective and unreliable source of data. Wundt argues that by carefully controlling stimuli and measuring reaction times, it becomes possible to objectively analyze the elements of conscious experience and the laws governing their combination. The assertion rests on the possibility of isolating fundamental mental processes, termed elements, and revealing the governing laws of their combination, much like a chemist analyzing chemical compound. Section 2 The Method of Introspection and its Limitations. Wundt meticulously outlines his method of trained introspection, emphasizing the need for rigorous control and systematic variation of experimental conditions. He acknowledges the inherent limitations of introspection as a subjective method, but argues that these limitations can be mitigated through careful training of observers and precise control over the stimuli presented. Observers undergo extensive training to report their sensory experiences accurately and without bias, reducing the influence of interpretation and prior knowledge. He proposes the method as a means to access the fundamental elements of conscious experience through controlled experimentation and precise observation. He stresses the importance of focusing on immediate experience, avoiding retrospective reflection or interpretation. The validity of this approach hinges on the assumption that individuals can accurately and reliably report their sensory experiences, a proposition that has been subject to ongoing debate and refinement within psychology. Much philosophical and scientific discussion circles the possibility of true objective introspection. Section 3 Sensation and Perception. A substantial portion of Principles of Physiological Psychology deals with the analysis of sensation and perception. Wundt explores the various sensory modalities, including vision, hearing, touch, and taste, examining the relationship between physical stimuli and corresponding sensory experiences. He investigates the psychophysical laws governing these relationships, such as Weber's law and Fechner's law, which describe the mathematical relationship between the intensity of a stimulus and the perceived magnitude of sensation. He proposes that sensory experience can be broken down into elementary sensations, each characterized by its intensity, quality, and duration. Combining these elementary sensations, more complex perceptions arise through a process of association. Wundt's examination of spatial perception is particularly noteworthy, where he proposes a theory of local signs, postulating that each point on the retina is associated with a specific spatial location, enabling the perception of depth and distance. This section attempts to bridge the gap between physiology and psychology by linking sensory experiences to specific neural processes. However, critics later pointed out that the reductionist approach to sensation and perception may oversimplify the complexity of perceptual processes. Section 4. Reaction time, experiments and voluntary action. Wundt employs reaction time experiments to investigate the speed of mental processes, examining the time it takes individuals to respond to various stimuli under different conditions. He proposes that reaction time can be used to measure the duration of different cognitive operations, such as perception, discrimination, and choice, by manipulating the complexity of the task and measuring the corresponding changes in reaction time. Wundt attempts to isolate the time required for each mental operation. He explores the factors that influence reaction time, including stimulus intensity, response complexity, and individual differences. He also examines the role of attention and volition in voluntary action, suggesting that voluntary actions involve a series of mental processes, including the formation of an intention, the selection of a response, and the execution of the action. Wundt's reaction time experiments provide valuable insights into the temporal dynamics of mental processes, paving the way for later developments in cognitive psychology. The emphasis on quantitative measurement and experimental manipulation established a precedent for future research on attention, decision-making, and motor control. The inherent difficulty in isolating and measuring specific mental processes is a recurring issue. Section 5. Attention and perception. Wundt dedicates significant attention to the concept of a perception, a central mechanism in his theory of consciousness. A perception refers to the process by which individuals actively attend to and organize their sensory experiences, creating a coherent and meaningful representation of the world. He distinguishes between passive and active attention, proposing that passive attention is driven by the salience of stimuli, while active attention involves a deliberate effort to focus on specific aspects of experience. He argues that the selective focus of attention is critical for determining which sensory experiences enter conscious awareness. A perception is seen as an active process of synthesis, where individuals combine elementary sensations into more complex perceptions, forming a unified and coherent conscious experience. Wundt suggests that a perception is controlled by the will, allowing individuals to consciously direct their attention and regulate their thoughts and actions. This notion has important implications for understanding voluntary action and the role of consciousness in behavior. The concept of a perception, sometimes translated as a perceptive synthesis, forms a cornerstone of Wundt's theoretical framework, highlighting the active and constructive nature of conscious experience. Section 6. Feelings and emotions. Wundt extends his analysis beyond sensation and perception to explore the realm of feelings and emotions. He proposes that feelings can be characterized along 3 independent dimensions: pleasure or displeasure, tension relief, and excitement depression. He argues that these 3 dimensions represent the fundamental qualities of feeling, combining to produce the wide range of emotional experiences. His tridimensional theory of feeling suggests that emotions are not simply subjective experiences but also have a physiological basis, involving changes in bodily state and behavior. Wundt explores the relationship between emotions and motivation, suggesting that emotions serve to guide behavior by motivating individuals to approach pleasurable stimuli and avoid unpleasant ones. The analysis of emotions offers insights into the motivational and affective aspects of human experience, contributing to a more comprehensive understanding of the human psyche. While revolutionary for its time, subsequent research has questioned the universality and sufficiency of Wundt's three dimensions. Section 7. The principle of creative synthesis. A key concept in Wundt's psychology is the principle of creative synthesis, which states that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. He argues that the combination of elementary sensations and feelings does not simply result in a linear sum of their individual characteristics, but instead produces a new, emergent quality. Creative synthesis reflects the active and constructive nature of consciousness, where individuals actively organize and integrate their experiences to create coherent and meaningful representations of the world. This principle challenges the associationist assumption that mental processes are simply the result of passive associations between elements. Wundt proposes that consciousness actively shapes and organizes experience through the process of apperception. This concept also has implications for understanding complex cognitive processes, such as language and thought, where the meaning of a sentence or idea is not simply the sum of the meanings of its individual words or concepts. Creative synthesis highlights the dynamic and adaptive nature of the mind, emphasizing its capacity to generate novel and unexpected patterns of thought and behavior. Section 8. Voluntarism and the will. Wundt's psychology is often referred to as voluntarism, emphasizing the role of the will in shaping conscious experience and behavior. He proposes that the will is an active, directing force that guides attention, regulates thoughts, and initiates actions. Wundt distinguishes between voluntary and involuntary actions, suggesting that voluntary actions are driven by conscious intentions, while involuntary actions are automatic and reflexive. The will is seen as the ultimate source of agency and control, enabling individuals to consciously pursue their goals and shape their own destinies. Wundt's voluntaristic psychology contrasts with mechanistic and deterministic views of human behavior, emphasizing the importance of free will and conscious choice. He also recognizes the limitations of the will, acknowledging that individuals are influenced by both internal and external factors. The concept of the will, however, has been subject to considerable debate and scrutiny, with some critics questioning whether it is a genuine psychological construct or simply a convenient label for complex cognitive processes. Section 9. The role of language and thought. Wundt explores the relationship between language and thought, proposing that language plays a crucial role in shaping conscious thought and communication. He argues that language provides a framework for organizing and expressing thoughts, enabling individuals to communicate their ideas to others. Wundt distinguishes between inner speech, the internal monologue that accompanies thought, and outer speech, the spoken or written expression of thoughts. He suggests that inner speech plays a critical role in cognitive processes such as planning, problem-solving, and decision-making. His work suggests a complex interplay between language and thought. He explores the psychological processes involved in understanding and producing language, offering insights into the cognitive mechanisms underlying communication. Section 10. Cultural psychology and higher mental processes. Wundt recognized the limitations of experimental psychology in studying higher mental processes, such as language, thought, and culture. He argued that these processes are shaped by historical and cultural factors, requiring different methodological approaches. He proposed the field of cultural psychology, or Volkspsychology, to examine the influence of culture on the development of human consciousness and behavior. He emphasized the importance of studying language, myths, customs, and social institutions to understand the cultural context in which human thought and action are embedded. Wundt's cultural psychology represents the significant departure from the individualistic focus of experimental psychology, emphasizing the importance of social and cultural factors in shaping human experience. This section highlights the limitations of introspection, when applied to the investigation of higher-order cognitive phenomena. Section 11 Critiques and revisions to Wundt's system. Wundt's Principles of Physiological Psychology faced numerous critiques and revisions over the course of its several editions. Some critics challenged the validity of introspection as a method, arguing that it is inherently subjective and unreliable. Others questioned the reductionist approach to sensation and perception, arguing that it oversimplifies the complexity of perceptual processes. Wundt's voluntaristic psychology also faced criticism, with some questioning the role of the will in shaping conscious experience and behavior. Despite these criticisms, Wundt continued to defend his theoretical framework, making revisions and elaborations in subsequent editions of Principles of Physiological Psychology. He acknowledged some of the limitations of his approach but maintained that it provided a valuable foundation for understanding the structure and dynamics of conscious experience. These revisions demonstrate the ongoing evolution of Wundt's thinking and his willingness to engage with criticisms of his work. Section 12 Wundt's Legacy and Impact on Psychology. Despite facing challenges, Wundt's Principles of Physiological Psychology had a profound and lasting impact on the development of experimental psychology. It established psychology as a scientific discipline grounded in empirical observation and experimental manipulation. Wundt's emphasis on rigorous methodology and quantitative measurement set a standard for future research in psychology. His work also influenced the development of structuralism, a school of thought that sought to analyze the structure of conscious experience into its elementary components. Though structuralism faded, Wundt's dedication to experimental rigor endured. His students played critical roles in establishing labs across the globe. His ideas had a significant impact on the development of cognitive psychology, which emerged as a dominant paradigm in the latter half of the 20th century. Wundt's emphasis on the active and constructive nature of consciousness continues to resonate with current research on attention, perception, and cognitive control. Even though specific theories have been challenged or superseded, his commitment to empirical research remains central to the discipline. Conclusion. Wilhelm Wundt's Principles of Physiological Psychology represents a landmark achievement in the history of psychology. While certain core claims regarding introspection and the elemental nature of consciousness have undergone significant revision and reinterpretation, its enduring significance lies in its establishment of psychology as a scientific discipline. The rigorous methodological approach, emphasis on quantitative measurement, and exploration of fundamental psychological processes all contribute to its lasting impact. Through analyzing sensation, perception, attention, emotion, volition, and language, Wundt laid a foundation upon which diverse schools of psychological thought build their own theories and approaches. Principles of Physiological Psychology may not represent the final word on the science of the mind, but it remains a crucial milestone in the ongoing quest to understand the complexities of human consciousness and behavior. Its historical role in the birth of scientific psychology assures its continued recognition as a seminal work.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.